Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to take a look, well actually a second look, at what I believe is the best value 500 watt power supply in the UK market at the moment. Keep watching to find out why. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you to death with all the technical details because frankly I don't have the ability to test them, and I rely on other websites such as Johnny Guru, things like that, to work out what is good and what is bad. And then I make a purchase and I base my decisions around that purchase, make some reviews, etc, etc, and I find out what's good and what's bad. Anyway, this is the RIOTORO Builders Edition 500 watt power supply. Now this is the second one I've had. The first one, which I was sent to kindly by RIOTORO for a review, I found to be actually a really good power supply, and also extremely good value for money, which is why I recommended it. So I've got a build which I'm doing at the moment, which is a budget build, a Athlon 200 GE, basic motherboard, Cooler Master case, which we're going to at a later date, that's another story, but Cooler Master case, and I'm going to put in the EVGA GTX 970. Now this is actually quite a power hungry card. The processor, the Athlon 200 GE, not so power hungry. So I could probably get away with a lot less of a large power supply. So I did the usual, had a scan on the UK websites, scan.co.uk, CCL, all those kinds of things. And I went back to the old favourite, Amazon. So on Amazon, I found the RIOTORO Builders Edition 500 watt, retailing at the moment at actually a really decent price, $34.99, including postage, which after looking around pretty much everywhere I could, no one could beat it. This was the best price by probably about a £5 margin from most other retailers. Now, there were other options available. There was the Thermaltake RGB 500, which I couldn't actually see what the cables were like, so I was unsure of. So that was a possible. There was also the EVGA BT450, which slightly less wattage, but pretty much is actually an identical power supply to this. So this is why I went with this one. So let's take a look at it, see what's in the box and see why I've made my decision, other than just the fact that it's a great price. Now, one of the reasons is it's from RIOTORO, so we get a 3-year warranty, which is great. Now the power supply itself actually looks pretty nice. Got a nice looking fan, nice looking logos, not too over the top with the badging, just a relatively minimalist badging on the side, good ventilation on the back, pretty much all the bases are covered. But what really swung it for me are these cables. Now the RIOTORO power supplies come with that kind of licorice style cable, so it's a very flat cable. Now if you're using a slightly cheaper case, or maybe even a more expensive case, sometimes in the back area where you're trying to do your cable management, it can be a real challenge to get those cables to stick in where you want them to, especially if you've got some braided cables like this larger 24 pin version. They can be a real problem to actually sort of train around the back of the motherboard, especially so for things like the EPS power for your processor. Those can be a real nightmare, especially being as they're in that top corner, and that is where kind of like a pressure area is for the rear back panel. So that is why I went for this particular model. The flat cables are fantastic for routing. If you're limited on space, obviously they're completely flat pretty much. They're only a couple of millimeters at the very most, so they'll fit into most builds. Now I'm going to unbundle the cables so you can see that there is actually quite a lot of cable in there, and some of them actually do get quite a decent length with. One thing that I really do like to see on these power supplies is the complete black cabling. So even though this cable itself has a braiding around it, as you can see from the rest of them, every single strand is black. So if you're doing a build in a case where you've got a clear side panel or maybe a tempered glass panel, this is never going to look out of place. It's always going to look clean, neat and tidy. Unlike some of the other power supplies which I was looking at, which still had the ketchup and mustard, which is nothing. Why have we still got ketchup and mustard? It's 2019, come on. I know things are cheap, but really, does it cost that much more to have black cabling than ketchup and mustard? Really? Okay, so that's the cabling. Now, one of the other key features for me on this particular build, because I'm using the EVGA GTX 970, it's an overclocked edition, so it requires 2 PCIe Express power connectors. So on this power supply, you've got two 6-pin, and they also double up to be 8-pin. So in that particular one, it's a 8-pin and a 6-pin, so we're totally covered. And again, because it's all on this kind of one umbilical cord, you can quite easily group it together and cable manage it so it doesn't look awful. Another cool feature, well, some would say cool, is the Molex connector. Now the Molex is actually completely on its own, on a separate strand from all the others. So maybe you've got like one of the RGB all-in-one controllers like I've shown in some of the previous videos, which you can check out up here. Quite often they do still need a Molex connector. So it's quite nice to have a separate cable just so you can route that to where your connector is for the RGB, keep it out of the way, and it doesn't have to interfere with any of your SATA devices. Again, a great feature. So that pretty much wraps up why I've chosen to buy this power supply again. Let me know in the comment section, what is your go-to power supply for budget builds? Now, I would class a budget power supply as anything being under around about £40 or roughly the same in dollars. I know there's an exchange rate thing, but American dollars do tend to buy a little bit more when it comes to power supplies in my opinion. So let me know in the comment section below, what is your go-to power supply, the reasons for it, and do you think this is still a good purchase in 2019? This has been the RIOTORO Builders Edition 500 watt power supply. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.